Hi, welcome back to part 2. So Philip and William have just flown out of the window. Mr. and Mrs. Gregg ran to the window and looked out. The two boys now were high up in the sky. Then Mrs. Gregg said to Mr. Gregg, "Oh, do you think we could do that, my dear?" "Well, I don't see why not. Come on, let's try." Well, Mr. Gregg began to flap his wings hard, and all at once up he went. Then Mrs. Gregg did the same. "Help!" she cried as she started going up. "Save me!" "Come on," said Mr. Gregg. "Don't be afraid." So out of the window they flew, far up into the sky, and it didn't take them long to catch up with Philip and William. Soon the whole family was flying around and around together. "Oh, it's lovely," said William. "I've always wanted to know what it felt like to be a bird." "Your wings are not getting tired, dear, are they?" Mr. Gregg asked Mrs. Gregg. "No, not at all," said Mrs. Gregg. "I could go on forever." "Hey, look down there," said Philip. "Somebody's walking in our garden." They all looked down, and there below them in their own garden they saw 4 enormous wild ducks. The ducks were as big as men, and what is more, they had long, great arms instead of their wings. The ducks were walking in a line to the door of the Greggs' house, swinging their arms and holding their bills up in the air. "Stop!" called a tiny Mr. Gregg, flying down to the low over their heads. "Go away, that's my house." The ducks looked up and quacked. "Quack, quack." And the first one put out a hand, opened the door of the house and went in. The others went in after him, and the door was shut. The Greggs flew down and sat on the wall near the door. Mrs. Gregg began to cry. Oh dear, she sobbed. "They've taken our house. What shall we do? We've no place to go." Even the boys began to cry a little bit now. "We'll be eaten by cats and foxes in the night," said Philip. "I want to sleep in my own bed," said William. Now then, it isn't any good crying," said Mr. Gregg. "That won't help us. Shall I tell you what we're going to do?" "What?" they all said. Mr. Gregg looked at them and smiled. "We're going to build a nest." "A nest?" they said. "Can we do that?" "Well, we must do that. We've got to sleep somewhere. Follow me." They flew off to a tall tree, and right at the top of it, Mr. Gregg chose the place for the nest. "Right, now we want sticks," he said. "Lots and lots of little sticks. Off you go, all of you, and find them and bring them back here." "But we have no hands," said Philip. "Then use your mouths." Mrs. Gregg and the children flew off. Soon they were carrying little sticks in their mouths. Mr. Gregg took the sticks and started to build the nest. "More," he said. "I want more and more sticks. Keep going." The nest began to grow. Mr. Gregg was very good at making the sticks stick together. After a while he said, "Right, that's enough sticks now. Now I want leaves, feathers and things like that to make the inside all nice and soft." The building of the nest went on and on. It took a long time, but at last it was finished. "Try it," said Mr. Gregg, hopping back. He was very pleased with his work. Oh, isn't it lovely?" cried Mrs. Gregg, going into it and sitting down. "I feel I might lay an egg at any moment." The others got in beside her. "Oh, how warm it is," said William. "What fun to be living so high up," said Philip. "We may be small, but nobody can hurt us up here." "But what about food?" said Mrs. Gregg. "We haven't had a thing to eat all day." "That's right," said Mr. Gregg. "So now we'll fly back to the house, go in by an open window and get the tin of biscuits when the ducks aren't looking." We will be pecked to bits by those dirty great ducks," cried Mrs. Gregg. "We shall be very careful, my love," said Mr. Gregg, and off they went. But when they got to the house, they found all the windows and doors closed. There was no way in. "Just look at that beastly duck cooking at my stove," cried Mrs. Gregg as she flew past the window. "How dare he? And look at that one holding my lovely gun," shouted Mr. Gregg. "And one of them is lying in my bed," yelled William, looking into the top window. "And one of them's playing with my electric train," cried Philip. Oh dear," said Mrs. Gregg. "They've taken over our whole house. We shall never get it back. What are we going to eat?" "I will not eat worms," said Philip. "I would rather die." "Or slugs," said William. Mrs. Gregg took the two boys under her wings and hugged them. "Don't worry," she said. "I can mince it all up very fine and you won't even know the difference. Lovely slug burgers, delicious worm burgers." "No," cried William. "Never," cried Philip. "Oh, disgusting," said Mr. Gregg. "Just because we have wings we don't have to eat bird food. We shall eat apples instead. Our trees are full of them. Come on." So they flew off to an apple tree. But to eat an apple without holding it in your hands is not easy. Every time you try and get your teeth into it, it just pushes away. In the end, they were able to get a few small bites each, and then it began to get dark. So they all flew back to the nest and they laid down to sleep. Okay, we're going to leave it there, okay? And we'll finish that story next week. Be something to look forward to, won't it? Okay, hope you've enjoyed that. Have a good week. Keep yourselves safe. Keep yourselves busy. And I shall see you in a week's time. Take care. Goodbye.